Nuclear weapons have always been a prevalent issue since their conception, always surrounded by controversy and under fire from people like Enrika Gregory. In her TED Talk, The World Doesn't Need Nuclear Weapons, the title says it all, and she takes a stance parallel to most human rights activists. Today, I want to look at the different rhetorical appeals Enrika Gregory uses in her presentation, and how she uses them to convince the audience that the world doesn't need nuclear weapons. How, over the course of 15 minutes, she is able to turn the dread and anxiety surrounding nuclear weapons into hope and optimism for a brighter future by referencing our own history tied with nuclear weapons, and how her colleagues are working hard today to eliminate them. Enrika Gregory dedicates the first several minutes of her presentation entirely to explaining the full destructive capabilities of nuclear weapons.
Under the right circumstances, an amount of highly enriched uranium about the size of your morning latte would be enough to kill 100,000 people instantly. Hundreds of thousands of others would become horribly ill, and parts of the city would be uninhabitable for years, if not for decades. But you can forget that nuclear latte because today's nuclear weapons are hundreds of times more powerful even than those we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Now, nuclear weapons aren't exactly an approachable subject. Given that we're talking about hundreds of thousands of lives on the line, one may find themselves understandably anxious or nervous discussing the subject. Despite the bleak tone it sets, Enrika Gregory presents this information because it is important for the audience to understand the threat nuclear weapons pose to the world. Now, it should also be noted that much of Enrika Gregory's credibility comes from events in history. Just in that clip, she wasn't afraid to mention two of the more popular examples of nuclear destruction, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. However, it's actually one of the lesser known of these events that contributes the most to her argument. In 1991, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the megatons to megawatts program was introduced as a collaboration between Russia and America, where, as Enrika Gregory puts it,
the U.S. sent cash to the Russians when they needed it most to secure loose nuclear materials and to employ out-of-work nuclear scientists. They worked alongside American scientists to convert weapons-grade uranium into the type of fuel that can be used for nuclear power instead.
The Megatons to Megawatts program proves that the world doesn't need nuclear weapons by showcasing a period in history where two of the largest nuclear superpowers in the world were able to work together in order to turn these vehicles of destruction into power that would benefit the lives of hundreds of thousands. Enrika Gregory aims to have her audience more emotionally invested in her argument than ever before, as all the unease and fear that develops while learning about the destructive capabilities of nuclear weapons turns into hope and inspiration, just as weaponized uranium was converted into valuable fuel in 1991. However, even if the Megatons to Megawatts program makes it seem nearly possible, the complete elimination of nuclear weapons still seems like an ambitious goal in our time, begging the questions: when will we see another opportunity like this in the future? When we wonder how to get rid of nuclear weapons, where do we place our faith? Great strides need to be taken in all fields, whether it's technology or politics, in order to reach this vision of the future. Enrika Gregory boosts the credibility of her argument by making these abstract ideas more tangible, by showcasing the work of incredible people who are working today, and this time, to mitigate the threat of nuclear weapons and take these great strides.
Every day, I get to meet people who are real pioneers in the field of nuclear threats. And as you can see, many of them are young women. And they're doing fiercely interesting stuff, like Marina Robinson Snowden here, who's developing new ways, better ways to detect nuclear warheads, which will help us overcome a critical hurdle to international disarmament. Or Melissa Hannum, who's using satellite imaging to make sense of what's going on around far-flung nuclear sites.
By showcasing the work of her colleagues, Enrika Gregory is able to illustrate what is being done in the present that hints towards the prosperity of the future, making her claims more believable. And beyond that, it's inspiring nonetheless to bear witness to these accomplishments being made. Enrika Gregory's presentation acts as a message to a generation of people inspired to innovate and create. The start of her presentation lays bare the threat we pose to ourselves by keeping nuclear weapons, and instills a nervous atmosphere as the viewer learns about the sheer quantity we have along with the destructive power of each and every one of them. However, by understanding how bleak our past and present is, she helps us as viewers also understand how bright and hopeful our future can be when we rally to people who inspire change.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Good night.